The next variable type that I'm going to talk about is the date type. So there's a date in the BRFSS data set that indicates the interview date. That's what this I stands for. So I'm just going to look at the first few values here, interview date. And you can see how they're recorded. And because we're humans, not computers, we can kind of see how this works. So you can see the 2014 here, and then 0117 probably means January 17th, 2014. So that's great that we can figure that out. Computers do not have such an easy time figuring that out. So when you're dealing with a data set that has dates, you have to turn the variable into a date object in some way. So how do computers deal with dates? Well, ideally, we'd be able to do things like see how many days apart two different interviews were. We want to have some kind of number. But we also want to be able to make a plot that shows not just like a number, but an actual date on it. So what computers will do is, different software packages will do is turn the dates into number of days since some particular starting point. Popular choices include things like January 1st, 1900, January 1st, 1960, etc. And they'll turn the date into number of days since that initial date, which means that if I subtract like yesterday's date from today's date, I'll get -1, for example. And that's a good thing to be able to talk about how far apart two different days are. But then what a date object will do, this is another kind of object in R, just like a numeric or a character or a factor, a date object will not only know how many days have passed since January 1st, 1960, but also know what the month and year are, etc., which is important. So in fact, if I'm trying to understand dates and I want to confirm that I'm right, that this interview date variable means January 17th, 2014, it's often helpful to look at a subset of the data. So it's a huge data set. I don't want to look at all the rows, but here I'm taking a subset of the data set, first 10 columns, and the subset of these particular column names that I found that are related to dates. So if I run this, here's what I get. We have the interview date, but also the data set contains month, day, and year, and now I can see, yes, this definitely was January 17th, 2014, which is helpful. So as I'm trying to create a date variable in R, I could use either the iDate or these three variables together. It's the same information. There's a separate video on how to handle dates and how to use the as.date command in the R extras, which you should watch. Here I'm just going to run this line, which makes a new variable in my data set called new date. I can make a table of the dates, but I don't actually want to look at that table because there's a lot of different dates within this year. But I can check the length of the table and see how many different dates interviews happened on. And if I do that, I give the number 397, which sounds about right because I think this is a little bit more than 1 year's worth of interviews.